All right. Well, we'll get you more political updates. But before that, here's an update coming in from the Bombay High Court on the very interesting case that's currently ongoing between Kotak Mahindra Bank and RBI. And Kotak's counsel, Mr. Harish Salve, is said to have told the court that they will reduce the promoter's stake to 20% by May 2020, which means after that date, the founder, of course, in this case is Uday Kotak, is not going to be owning more than 20% in Kotak Bank. But in the meanwhile, they are seeking interim protection by the Bombay High Court. It's a very, very important case, remember, because I think firstly, this is the first time that a bank is actually approaching the courts on an RBI directive. So many are honestly seeing it as a direct challenge to the regulator, but it's interesting to see that they are going to, at least Kotak Bank is saying that they will bring down the stake to 20% by May 2020. It's not challenging the directive or anything like that. They're just essentially, I suppose, if I could just, a simple reading of it does indicate that they're essentially just asking for a year or a year and a half more time to bring down the stake to 20% from close to 30% at present. They had made that attempt earlier by issuing these perpetual non-convertible preference shares, but the RBI said that that issuance does not meet its requirement to dilute shareholding of Uday Kotak, and that's when Kotak Bank had actually approached the Bombay High Court. They filed a writ petition. Okay, I think okay, my colleague Ishita Guha, who has been at the Bombay High Court tracking the proceedings, joins in now. Ishita, I think these flashes clearly show that I think Kotak does want to reduce its stake, but it's just essentially asking for more time from the court.
Well, absolutely. As you said, that Kotak has the clear intention and has made it amply clear in front of the Bombay High Court that they are willing to reduce their promoter stake to 20% from the current 30%, but they need more time. And in fact, they made a proposal in front of the bench at the Bombay High Court today saying that as per the regulatory requirements, they will be reducing their promoter stake by 20%. To 20% by May 2020, and as per the regulatory requirements, which is mandated by the Reserve Bank of India, the founder of Kotak Mahindra Bank, who is Uday Kotak, will not be owning more than 20% in Kotak Mahindra Bank. In fact, Kotak Mahindra Bank has also sought interim protection from the Bombay High Court that there should be no action taken against Kotak Mahindra Bank by the Reserve Bank of India as per the regulatory framework of reducing promoter stake is concerned. Now we know that everything remains inconclusive from today's hearing at the Bombay High Court, and the court has adjourned the case to April 1 now. So there will be more details coming in as far as reducing promoter stake in Kotak Mahindra Bank to 20% is concerned. Besides that, this is also an important case, as you mentioned, because this will set precedent for other banks who are probably on the path of reducing promoter stake. Let's say for Bandhan Bank, which is also on the path of reducing promoter stake, but had attracted penalties from Reserve Bank of India. But Kotak Mahindra Bank has been fighting the case at Bombay High Court, and they are sort of sticking with their proposal of reducing promoter stake by way of issuing preferential shares, while Reserve Bank of India said that it's an invalid proposal and it violates the regulatory requirements. Therefore, the dispute at the Bombay High Court, the next hearing will take place on April 1, and more details will be coming in on that day.
So, Ishita, was there any mention by the Kotak Counsel with respect to the PNCPS, or the perpetual non-convertible preference shares? Because from what I understand, last month, or rather in December, when Kotak Bank did approach the Bombay High Court, they essentially wanted to know the validation of these. Okay, I have with me Ashwin Parekh, Managing Partner of Ashwin Parekh Advisory. Ashwin, thanks so much for joining in. It looks like Kotak is very clear. They are willing to bring down the shareholding of Uday Kotak to 20%. But, you know, of course, we have said more than enough about how this is the first time that the bank is actually going and knocking on the doors of a courtroom, with respect to an RBI directive. But again, from these statements that are coming in from the Kotak Counsel, it looks like they are willing to bring it down to 20% and are not essentially willing to challenge the validity of those preference shares that they were earlier planning to issue.
Well, yeah, so there are two things, I mean, right from the very first day on this subject, and there are several other subjects as well, where, RBI's regulations actually, they examine those on a case-to-case basis. So this is quite clearly that kind of an example. And maybe you've seen that at that time when, Kotak was given the banking license, the same set of conditions which were at one point in time, imposed on the other private sector banks in 92, 93 when they happened. And then they also were given enough time, to dilute their equity. The promoters were given time to dilute their equity on a case-to-case basis. So there's no hard and fast rule about it. But I suppose what does matter, is how the promoter really, whether the promoter really intends to do it, and whether, he will really find a good time in the market really to do it. Failing which, once again, we may have a similar situation. Even in May 2020, we may come across a situation where either the market wasn't conducive or there was some valid reason or some reason. Then once again, the regulator may have to re-examine the matter. But I suppose for now, considering that there is already an undertaking, that the whole thing will be diluted, I suppose we'll have to work with this, I suppose.
All right. We also have Mr. H.P. Ranina joining in. Mr. Ranina, I think this case will be setting a precedent for a lot of court cases going forward. Yes, we did have that Bandhan Bank issue as well at hand with respect to the same thing, bringing down promoter shareholding. But they did not challenge the RBI directive, but Kotak Bank did. How do you see this case proceeding? What sort of precedents do you expect this case to set going forward?
Well, it's a question of waiting for the judgment. If the judgment is in favor of the RBI, then obviously the RBI guidelines will hold the field. In case they feel that the RBI guidelines are not correct and the Kotak Mahindra was right in its views, then of course that question will arise. So really what we have to, it's not a precedent. We'll have to see what is the law which is now enunciated by the High Court. And of course, the Kotak can or the RBI can go in appeal also to the Supreme Court. But what we are waiting for is clarity on this issue as to what is the law on the subject and whether a reduction in equity shareholding means actually that you have to reduce equity and you can't issue preference shares. That is what we want to see.
Yeah, and that's essentially what even Kotak Bank went to the court about, that
yes.
What is the validity of these preference shares, because the RBI said that that does not meet the criteria of reducing their Kotak shareholding. Ashwin, do you think, it can't be that simple, right, that Uday Kotak is just going to reduce his shareholding in Kotak Bank by 10% because he's holding approximately 30% right now. It definitely won't be that simple. And obviously, since this entire path of issuance of preference shares for now is sub judice, what are the other paths that Kotak and team could take? Because RBI has enacted on this before as well. We did see that happen with Bandhan Bank when they were barred from expanding branches, etc.
Yeah, sure. So there are 2-3 things which may happen now, depending on, of course, the court decision. We'll have to really wait, as Mr. Ranina said, for the court decision to be looked at. But I would assume that in the normal course, if RBI's empowerment is not questioned by the court, if it is agreed that, then in that case RBI can also re-examine, and then the new proposal of diluting, Mr. Kotak diluting his equity, in the bank could be re-examined by the RBI. So I would say it depends on first the order. The second is what kind of hard line, if RBI's powers are challenged in some form, whether they take the matter any further, whether they drop it over there, then there will be other cases also that they will have to really consider when they do that. So that is one of the things. The second one, of course, is if the court stays their powers. In the sense it agrees with the fact that the RBI does have, under the Act, the necessary powers, then in that case, RBI can also reconsider its own decision, either on the preferential shares or on the fresh equity issuance. Not fresh equity, but the dilution of Mr. Kotak's case till such time as, he promises that's 2020, and not impose any particular penalty against him or any particular sanction, on the bank on account of that, including, of course, the salary or including the branch expansion or whatever. So it's a matter of detail, but I would say at this point in time, what is being examined is the RBI's powers on both the matters. One is per se, how far can it go? And second is on a certain kind of instrument where the RBI said no, but then let's see what the court order says about that as well.
All right, Mr. Parekh as well as Mr. Ranina, we leave it at that. Thanks so much for sharing your quick perspective on the update that's coming in from the Bombay High Court, where Kotak is saying that their intention is very clear. They do want to reduce the stake to 20%. They're just asking for time. May 2020 is the time that the bank is asking for. And at least up until now, there seems to have been no mention with respect to the issuance of the preference shares, which essentially is what the RBI turned down.